I have a distinct memory of attempting to run away. I don't really know the reason, but for some reason my brother and I decided that we were going to pack our bags and we were going to run away from home. Well, he packed his bag. I took my bright yellow metal Tonka truck, right, and we took off. And everything was fine for like a block when that big truck that I was carrying started to get awfully heavy. So I did the only thing that I could think of doing. I gave it to my older brother. Right? So we were running away, and he's carrying his bag of stuff and my Tonka truck. And for a while, man, everything was great. Running away had never been so fun. And I was on cloud nine, freedom at last, this was lovely. Until that Tonka truck got a little bit too heavy for my brother. And he gave it back to me. And all that weight that I thought that I had jettisoned from my life came crashing back down. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a weight that seems just too heavy to carry? It could be a minor frustration that you've been carrying for a while. It could be a big thing. But have you ever had that? That it just seems to slow you down. It seems to be a burden for you. Imagine if in addition to carrying all the burdens that you have to carry, imagine that you had the additional weight of trying to secure your salvation, of trying to figure out whether or not you were on God's good side, and trying to manage that. In fact, ask yourself this question. If you were in charge of securing God's favor for you, if you were in charge of securing God's favor, how confident would you be in this moment, right now, that the pendulum would be swinging in your favor? How confident are you? If you look over through your life, over what's happened, the ups and downs of this week, past week, let's say, how confident would you that you've done enough to be in God's good graces? Or ask yourself this question. If I was in charge of securing your salvation by all the stuff that I do here at the church, how confident would you be in my ability to secure your salvation? I'm not looking for a compliment, by the way. But see, in some sense, that is what our reading from Hebrews is attempting to address. Right? The reading talks about the uniqueness of Jesus in being able to offer us a freedom that no other person, no other avenue can offer us. And that's a freedom from all the weights that we carry around. Jesus is able to remove them from our lives. But it's also more than that. It's also securing salvation. Jesus is the only one, Hebrews says, can do this. And when we come to Jesus, we can be confident in the salvation, in the freedom, and all the permanence of what Christ offers us. It's natural to try to find an avenue for our burdens. After all, they are heavy upon us. We don't want to carry them around, right? And whether it's an anger that we hold inside, or it's an insecurity, whether it's a hurt or betrayal, whether it's just an annoying person in our lives and they just kind of grate on us. We know that when what we carry around, it begins to spoil our inner vitality. Right? The frustration, the weight, the burden, we feel off when we have to carry these around by ourselves. To use the language that's in the Bible often, we feel heavy laden. Right? Now that's why for Israel, God set up the temple. Because it was this place where they could go, where Israelites could go if they wanted to put down those Tonka trucks that they were carrying. They could go to the temple. If you feel burdened, if you feel besieged by sin, go to the temple. Make a sacrifice, have a prayer. The problem is that it was incomplete, because it was based on human activity. Our reading begins, "Now there have been many of those priests, since death prevented them from continuing in office." Right? So it might have been great to have a godly priest for a time, but eventually that might change. And then how will this new priest be able to effect your salvation? And what happens if something occurs during the priest offering their sacrifice? Well, did it work? Were you actually forgiven of your sins? What if they mess up the words? What is more, even if the best priest, even if they just know everything and they're wonderful, even the best priest by nature is a weak individual. Verse 27 says that the high priests always had to make a sacrifice for their own sins before making a sacrifice for the sins of others. Well, what happens if the priest didn't do that correctly? What happens if something occurred in their life and they're not actually, they didn't actually do their own sacrifice for their sins, so they're not in a right relationship with God? How does that affect their prayers for your salvation? How confident were you in their ability? For example, have you ever messed up a baking recipe? The cookie challenge is coming up, and so they're thinking about baking. Have you ever messed up a baking recipe? Have you ever mistaken baking powder for baking soda? Have you ever put in a cup of salt when it said a cup of sugar? Have you ever cracked eggs only to find that more shells go into the bowl than egg yolk? Has that ever happened to you? Have any of those things happened to you? It's happened to me. I've done each and every one of those things. So if I can't even master a simple cookie recipe, how well do you think I could master a sacrifice for your salvation? See, that's the point. Despite all good intentions, despite even the holiness of the most holy of earthly priests, you never really knew where you stood spiritually. Because the weakness of humanity always got in the way. And like giving away your Tonka truck to an older brother, it might feel great for a minute, but then you'd have to deal with it again. And even if you met the best priest who did the best sacrifice and offered the best prayer, you'd have to come back again and again and again and again. And so you perpetually lived with a sense of spiritual uncertainty, because that's the thing of imperfect things. They are never complete. They are never 100% for 100% of the time. There are so many people today who are living with that sense of spiritual uncertainty because they're trying to find an avenue for all the turmoil that they carry around, for all the stuff that they're dealing with. They're trying to find an avenue to release it, but it's always based on some human thing, whether it's a product or an activity or another person. They're trying to find this avenue, but it's always coming back because it can never be fully taken away. Because Jesus lives forever, Hebrews says, he has a permanent priesthood, and he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to make intercession for them. Take for a moment and just sit with that. What an amazing thought. What an amazing thought it is to know that when we come to Jesus in faith, we step into the constant flow of his ceaseless prayer for us. What might Jesus be praying for you right now? Do you think he is praying that you receive his blessing? That you just know his love and his grace? Do you think he is praying for a sense of healing in your life? Whether that's a physical healing or even just internal, emotional? Do you think Jesus is praying that you step away from whatever it is that might be stopping you from experiencing all the expressions of Christ's love? You know, it's one thing to have a human individual, well-intentioned, but ultimately weak, tell you all the wonderful things about God's love and God's presence. It's another thing to experience Jesus pouring out all of those things into your life. And Hebrews says that is what Jesus longs for. That is what Jesus is able to do when we come to him. Hebrews says that what Jesus offers is complete. It does not change. It will not be thwarted. Christ's role as our Savior never comes to an end. Each and every moment he is there. Hebrews says that such a high priest, Jesus, he is fitting for us. He meets our need. Full stop. There's no fine print. There's no caveats. There's no bait and switch. Jesus is able to meet our need in a way that nobody else can. And he can do this, Hebrews says, because he is holy, he is blameless, he is undefiled, he is separated from sinners, and he is exalted in the heavens. And we could spend 5 sermons talking about each and every one of those things very briefly. The reason why Jesus can offer us that complete, that total, that permanent salvation in a way that nobody else can, the way that no other thing can. The reason why Jesus can do it is because he is holy. He is set apart to uniquely fulfill God's desire for you. He is blameless. Never once did he err in that mission. Never once did he make a bad judgment. Never once did he make a wrong call. And so Jesus can only do that which is beneficial, which is loving, and which is good in our lives. He is undefiled. There is no spot of imperfection in him. With Jesus, there are no lies. There are no hypocrisies. There is no weakness that could possibly call his work into question. Jesus is separated from sinners, and it means that he is the sinless one. And as he is the sinless one, he can take away all sins. With Jesus, we don't have the blind leading the blind. We don't have the weak trying to save the weak. He was tempted as we are, yes, but he never sinned. He never faltered. He lived out, and he is the expression of the perfect realization of God's kingdom on earth. And Hebrews says that he is exalted in the heavens. Jesus has authority. He has authority, he has strength, he has power, he has rulership over all things in heaven and earth. He healed blind Bartimaeus because he is Lord of everything physical and everything earthly. He's able to act in that situation. And if our need is more internal, if there's a need for forgiveness, or if there's a need for love, or for peace, or something within us, well, then he has authority over that too. He has power over all things in heaven as well as earth. Jesus can meet all of our needs. And he can meet that need because he is the one with the power and the heart to do so. Jesus alone is fitting for our need. If you were to give voice right now about a need in your life, what would that be? Because we all have a need. We all have stuff that we carry around. And some of it's going to be big and some of it's going to be small, but we all carry around stuff. Because we are imperfect people and we live in imperfect worlds. And sometimes the imperfection of all that comes weighing down upon us. And whether it's a need for guidance, I need help figuring out where my life is going. Whether it's a need for healing or physical or emotional or spiritual healing. Maybe it's stepping away from a vice. You've been carrying around an activity or a habit like a big Tonka truck, and it's just taking its toll. Whatever your need is, why spend all your energy looking for a relief that only lasts for a moment, when Jesus can offer you one that lasts for eternity? Why pursue that which can only satisfy for a temporary period, when Jesus offers you that which will completely and totally comfort you perfectly? Why perform whatever sacrifice or action again and again and again and again, when the action of Jesus is once for all? Part of our reading is based on a larger discussion about hearing God's call. And the writer of Hebrews, they quote Psalm 104, "Today, if you hear my voice, do not harden your hearts." Jesus is calling. He's calling out with that prayerful cry, "Come to me, all who are weak and laden, and I will give you rest." This is his desire for you. This is his prayer for you. What are you sitting with this morning? And if there is something that has popped into your heart or mind, if there's something that you've been thinking about, could you see that as Jesus actually bringing that to your mind? Could that actually be the voice of Jesus saying, this? I want to free you from this. Will you let him? Because he is able to save completely those who come to God through him. So if you want to come to Jesus, or if you just want to make one more step toward him and offer him that need that you have, then I invite you in the silence of your hearts to pray with me.